Yes, Spurs fans, how are we doing? We are going to be doing our own personal reflection of a cash in or keep, basically talking about some untouchables at Tottenham Hotspur, some people that we'd be willing to sell, people that maybe we would sell for the right price. At the minute, Spurs have a lot of players they have to get rid of. Of course, we're waiting on more news on the incomings, but it's been a little bit slow in that department. So we thought we'd have a little fun with the tier maker and just take a look at maybe some players that we would actually be considering as, the top line players that you wouldn't sell at any cost, and then some ones that maybe you would negotiate a little bit more for. Let's start off with maybe something a bit more random here. I think a good example of maybe an untouchable at the club, Dave, probably for the most part, would be maybe someone like a Lucas Bergvall, especially for the majority of this fan base. I think he is considered an
Mm.
untouchable. Any other untouchables that you think we should maybe get off the list? Romero, probably a controversial one. So maybe you go and take that one away, Dave. Why is Romero, for me, he's untouchable. I can give my reasons, but I'm curious what you think. Is he untouchable or would you sell him for the right price?
Well, it's simple. You keep your best players and you build around them. So for me, he should be untouchable. He shouldn't be in the market whatsoever.
I think he's a world class defender, and I don't really see the need to sell one of our world class. I don't know how many world class players we really even have at the club other than him and Mickey Van de Ven, maybe to some extent. So I think he's absolutely
Mm.
untouchable. And I just don't know if you can really replace Romero fully for even 60, 70 million euros. Maybe if you get upwards of the ridiculous prices of like 150, 125, which I know we're not going to get. I just don't see the need, and I just don't think there's even any other Christian Romero's really out there at the minute, in football. I think he's one of the best passing center backs in the game. I think he's one of the most aggressive defenders, which are the type of defenders that I personally prefer to have in a team. I think you always need that bully-like defender, in your back line. They can't all just be complacent, kind of willing to let the other guy, make the initiate the move or initiate, the tackle. I like that Romero's that sort of guy. Personally, I could rant forever about him, but for me, Romero completely untouchable. And I think for a lot of people as well, Mickey Van de Ven would be untouchable. Dave, am
Me-
I right? I think they both, in their own right, have these world class attributes in different areas, but they have world class attributes that are just almost irreplaceable.
For me, partnerships on the pitch are so valuable, Jack. And when
Yeah.
you get a partnership like Romero and Van de Ven who actually complement each other, you don't ever want to break that up because that's a foundation you can build any team off. It reminds me very similar of the Jan and Toby sort of partnership, yin and yang.
Yeah.
Jan was the sort of more aggressive, could play a little, could run with the ball, whereas Toby could, hit a midget stick from 60 yards. So, he was unbelievable. I think Romero and Van de Ven are similar. With
Yeah.
Van de Ven, the pace, he's got all the raw attributes. I get maybe his only weakness is slightly being a bit more aggressive in the air, but he can improve on that. But if these injuries can like persist over the next 2 to 3 years and they get worse, I would reconsider it.
Okay. Probably people would say similar with Romero, right? Misses a lot of minutes. Just I would say Romero happens to, I think, miss, less time than even Mickey
Mm.
Ben has in his time here. But I think regardless of that, you both keep them because they're world class center backs in their own right. Pedro Porro. Now, is he a good price or is he untouchable?
Nah, for me, he's another one that's untouchable, Jack. He's going to be the now Trent Alexander's out of the way in the Premier
Yeah.
League. He's going to be the most
Yeah.
technically gifted fullback in the Premier League. Again, he's another player that as long as he's playing, you can always build around. You can always create chances off and stuff. Don't get me wrong, a bit of a liability defensively at times, but I'm hoping with a bit more competition for his place, that will make him improve in that regard.
I agree. I think he's so similar to Trent in the technical ability, but then, right, during certain games, sometimes he doesn't end up having the best defensive performance. In others, though, he can be very, very solid, I think,
Mm.
defensively. It's just kind of a bit hit or miss sometimes with him. That's probably even being a bit harsh. I think majority of the time, he is, pretty solid
Yeah.
defensively. He's just had some bad outings, especially this last season with Ange Postecoglou's defense, which we know can leave defenders exposed. But like you said, I think Pedro Porro really is, with his attributes, a guy that you can actually build the team around. Just kind of floating maybe more towards the bottom here. Destiny Udogi. Now, is he untouchable or is he fair price? Maybe you would, you know,
Do you know
consider
what,
selling.
Jack? Right now, I would argue he's untouchable because he's our only left back in the squad. But one area for me where I think he really lets me down is because I think he's a good defender, he's got pace, he's got power, and he often actually got himself into really good positions down that left hand side. But his end product has been left wanting a lot of times last season. At times you're looking at him, you say, pull the trigger. He's trying to cross the
Yeah.
ball into areas where it's not on and stuff like that. So if that doesn't improve in the next year or two,
Yeah.
you might reconsider it depending on what comes down the line. But right now, I'd go untouchable.
I would agree with every single thing you just said there. Now, let's go stick with fullbacks here. Jet Spence. I think he falls in. Here's my thing is that what I love about him is that I think he's like perfect competition fullback in that he's going to push Pedro Porro for his spot. He's going to push Destiny Udogie for his spot. In a sense, that makes him untouchable because it's hard to find players like that. But I don't know. Let's say 40 million, some ridiculous bid comes in for Jet Spence. Would you accept it?
Do you know what my fear is with Jed Spence, Jack? I think if he gets out of Tottenham, I think he goes on to new heights in his career. I think, right now is a bit of an unknown. Look, I think depending on the price, I think obviously if 50, 60 million came in, Tottenham would take it. But for me, I just think he's a player that's waiting to explode.
Yeah, I would consider him untouchable for now, but maybe down the road, some
Yeah.
ridiculous price comes in. Maybe you would consider it. Now, let's get to the juicy stuff. Sonny.
Do you know what, Jack? On this one, year left on his contract, 33 years of age, signs of slowing down in age maybe catching up on him, and at some point you've got to try and recoup your value. I think now is the right time when the legs are starting to go. So for me, I
Willing to
think,
sell? Yeah, meh.
only if a decent offer came in. I wouldn't be sitting there going 15, 20 million came in, sell him. I'm talking about 50, 60. If that came in, I'd sell him.
Yeah, so I think the difference between good price and willing to sell is like good price, you're like, yeah, snap your hand off,
Yeah.
absolutely, for that price. Willing to sell is kind of like, yeah, I would consider offers. Desperate's like, put him in
Yeah.
the taxi right now,
Yeah.
put him in the cab, kind of a scenario.
Irish
Let's go.
Hotspur show for services.
Need to patent that one. James Madison, Dave.
Right
Think
now,
after
do you
his
know what?
last season, I put him in untouchable, but his first season, I would have said good price. I just maybe right now untouchable, but he borders between good price and untouchable.
Do you know what, Jack? First season, I was left a bit uninspired by him, but and again, up to points last season, but then, he sort of hit back. He found a bit of form. So for me, right now, looking at our squad is untouchable. Wouldn't even consider selling them. But depending, a year or two down the line, and if he kicks on or not, then it could be a different conversation.
After James Madison, I think we could probably discuss Brennan Johnson. People will hate me. I gave him player of the season, but I'd say you get your money back, 50, 60 million. I'd take it, for Brennan Johnson personally. I don't know if he falls in the untouchable category for me, but people are probably going to absolutely slate me in the comments for that one. So Dave, can you back me up or does he fall in the untouchables?
Do you know what, Jack? I'm willing to jump deep into the fire with you here on this one. Look,
not willing to sell though, right? Not like, 30 million, 40 million comes
no,
in.
good price.
Yeah.
If a good price came in, I would take it. And the reason why was actually off the back of the conversation we were having on the debate show yesterday with Sean. The difference between maybe him and someone like Anthony Elanga. Elanga, I think, he's the sort of player that when you go to a top team, you're looking to create that half a yard by yourself or look to skin a player and create that space for yourself and whip in a dangerous ball. Alanga can do that. I don't think Brennan Johnson can. So that's why, and I don't think he has it in his locker either. So that's why I think if a bid came in of a sizable amount, if we can recoup the 50 million, even 40 million, I'd sell him.
Yeah. Now let's go for a controversial one. Kinski. I just think we have so many talented goalkeepers coming through at the minute. I was just baffled by Spurs' situation with the goalkeepers last year, where they decided and they gambled to keep Fraser Forster around instead of having Josh Keeley or Luka Gunter kind of promoted. And then you have Brandon Austin there as well. They kept Forster around, ended up hurting us. And they then had to be desperate to sign somebody. So they bring in Kinski. I'm not in love with Kinski is basically what I would say. Like, I'm actually more excited about Luka Gunter, Josh Keeley of the future. I'm going to put Kinski in the willing to sell category. Basically, if we get our money back, I'd consider it. It's just because I haven't seen enough from him that I'm like, yeah, good price, double your money. Maybe you take it. But I just feel like we have so many good goalkeepers coming through anyways that I'd rather see a Keeley or a Luka Gunter come through.
I understand your point you're making. I think you're being a little bit harsh on.
Yeah, it is harsh. Yeah,
I think, coming in from the Czech Republic League straight into the fire in the Premier League, it was always going to be a huge ask, a tall order. A player like that, especially as a goalkeeper, you want to sort of come in, get some good training sessions under your belt, working with the number one ahead of you, and sort of ease your way in. So, I think a little bit harsh on Kinski. I think there is a real goalkeeper there going forward in the future. My only problem is his form sort of depends on his mentality and how he's feeling at the time. He's a real confidence-based player. But while he's number 2 at Tottenham, I think he's always going to be in the good price category. If good price comes in, if he's number 2, at some point, you're going to take it.
Bentancur now, Dave. I mean, I love Bentancur. I
Mm,
think he's the only real experienced midfielder apart from James Madison that we currently have. I think he's a guy that would be great to have around. I think he borders between good price and untouchable. For me, I just don't really see a need to sell him at all because I think he can play as a number 6. I think
mm,
people are harsh on him by saying, "Oh, he can't do it all." I'm like, I think he had plenty of very good
mm.
games as a number 6 this last season, but maybe you can get more out of him as a number 8 because he does have that ability to get up and down, score goals, all action. I think he's an untouchable, but I feel like a lot of people would probably disagree with me on that one.
I do think there would be Spurs fans out there willing, to take a price for him if a good offer came in. And I can understand it to a degree with his availability over the last couple of seasons, right? With the long-term injury, self-inflicted suspensions and stuff like that. But ultimately, I go by the principle, if you don't sell your best players, you build around them. And Bentancur is our best midfielder in the Tottenham squad, so we keep him
I just think
untouchable.
the experience goes a long way for me too, since we already have such a young
Mm.
team at the minute as well. Kulusevski, Dave, captain of the Kulusevski army. I think he's untouchable for you. Is that right?
Do you know what? I'm a bit
Let's
torn
say
on this
60
one.
million comes in.
No. Look, I wouldn't. I want to give Kulusevski another season. I think for the most part of last season, I was proven correct on Kulusevski. I want to give him another year. Right now, as the squad stands, especially with some of their lack of experience out wide and stuff like that, Kulusevski is a player that can fill in a number of positions. Right now, untouchable. When some of these players kick on, it could be a case if Kulusevski doesn't drag his game to a new level, good price. Because right now, Kulusevski's at the point where he's showing all the glimpses of becoming a top player. But is that clinical edge, that them assists, them goals that you always speak about when it comes to Kulusevski, are they eventually going to come to the
Mm.
fore, or is he always going to be that guy that causes problems but never devastating?
Unrealistic number where it doesn't even fall in the good price category. If we added an extra category, let's just call it unrealistic. 80 million comes in right now for Kulusevski. Never would happen, but
No,
would you accept it?
no. I'm not. I don't. I'm not accepting any bid for Kulu this summer.
Okay,
And
okay.
then saying in the
Definition of
comments, I know.
untouchable then.
Yeah.
We got Dave down to the definition. Pop Matasar.
Do you know what? I'm gonna just quickly. I
I
know
love
people are
Sar.
gonna say good price, willing to sell. I just don't think people
He's so
understand
young
what
still.
Sar is. He's still young. Well, he's 22. It's getting to the point where he's sort of got to
Same age as Brennan
sort of
Johnson.
kick on and establish himself. But I think when you start, and I sort of argued this, and you to a large degree all last season, Jack. When Sar's not in that midfield, we don't have that terrorizer in there that can go around, break up play, turn the ball over and stuff like that. For me, there's always a value for a player in a squad. At the end of the day, it's a squad game, and you need players with different attributes. And for me, right now, Papa Matasar is an untouchable unless we bring in better midfield players.
I bet the logic for some people would be you could easily like double, triple your money on him at some point, but maybe you just
100%
give
you
him
could.
another season or two. I think you
Well,
give him another season or two until you can do that. Yeah.
I get that. I get that, right? But where did the 100 million that we've cashed in on Harry Kane get us?
Yeah, exactly.
Where did the Bale money get us? Where did the Modric money get us? You can't keep going down this route and going, yeah, we need that money. We're going to do this, that, and the other, and then we sign a guy
Yep.
from
Yep.
Azerbaijan, Timbuktu, and all that crap.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that's part of the logic why you and I wouldn't sell Romero, why we wouldn't sell Pedro Porro, Mickey Van de Ven. It's like, do you really trust Spurs like to be able to spend the right money in the
Replace
right
them.
areas to
Yeah.
replace those guys? I personally don't. I think I'm glad you mentioned that actually. Dragashin, I'm willing to sell.
Willing to sell.
Desperate to sell, bit harsh.
No.
I'm like, I'm not in love with Dragashin. I'll just put it that way.
My dad's going to be crying in the comments. My dad loves this guy for some reason. He keeps saying to me, Dave, you're wrong. You're
He wants
wrong.
the
You're
man
wrong.
bun. That's what it is.
And look, I'm okay if he sticks around this year, but I'm also saying if a bid came in, I would be tempted to sell. For me, he had a run of 21 games in the back four, was useless, looked out of his depth, to be quite frank. So for me, I would be willing to cash in on Radu.
Is he in good price or willing to sell? Just quickly.
No, willing to sell.
Yeah, me too.
Especially with his agent.
Yeah, exactly. Dominic Solanke. Now, we would like to say he's untouchable because he's only been brought in and for a big fee. But I wonder, Dave, if you're in the good price category where if you got your money back, let's say 50, 60 million comes in, if you would be willing to sell him.
Do you know what, Jack? I'm actually warmer into Dominic Solanke, to be quite frank. You know, he's making it hard for me not to like him. But I wasn't enamored with him overall last season. I can appreciate he works hard and stuff, but that should always be a bare minimum. So for me, if a really good offer came in, yeah, I'd cash and go again.
Yeah, let's go in the unrealistic category. 70, 80 million comes in, maybe you sell him. But for me, like, it's almost too soon to call. I would say with him, it just, one season. But, it's fun. It's fun to be controversial. It's just fun to be controversial.
Well, like, the only reason why we're doing this video is because there's no news out there. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we're just having fun, instead of reporting on the news, we're just having fun and vibing. Exactly. Vicario, I think he's in the good price category for a lot of people. For me, I love him. I mean, I think he's a world-class shot stopper. Let's say 40, 50 million comes in, though. I wonder if I would be willing to accept that, But I mean, this is the thing, though. I do think he's a world-class shot stopper. It's just he has to improve in these other areas when it comes to set pieces, especially when it comes to claiming crosses. If he improves a lot on that, let's say this next season, 100% untouchable. But at the minute, I just wonder if 50 million bid comes in, you're halfway there to buying a Mike Mannion or something like that. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Do you know what, Jack? I understand Vicario's flaws, and it's mainly around how he actually commands his box in general under the high ball or crosses under pressure. Last season, coming back from the broken ankle, he sort of did play himself into trouble with the ball at his feet. But this guy's a world-class shot stopper, and for me, one of the best one-on-one goalkeepers I've actually seen.
Yeah,
in the
seriously,
Tottenham Hotspur jersey. And he had a lot of players bearing down on him over the last 2 years. And I can't forget the full Monty out in Norway there, where he took off his shorts and threw them into the crowd. He was that happy. And do you know what? I love the fact that he had no problem at one point in the season grabbing Bergvall, screaming at him. This is what players need to do at Tottenham Hotspur. So right now, untouchable.
Yeah, only so many left here. Kevin Danzo.
Untouchable right now.
Untouchable right now. Too soon.
Look at his dance moves. That alone, I'm not cashing in on, Jack. You know how much them dance moves got me going.
He's a bit like Jet Spence too, where he falls in good competition, kind of category. Yeah. Really good competition where you found that right balance. Basuma, I'd say desperate to sell.
Baluna.
Matisse Tell, this is controversial, but again, I like him, not in love with him. 40, 50 million comes in, I'd almost be willing, but maybe he is untouchable. Too soon, probably too soon.
Look, of course, we're only after signing him. He ain't going anywhere. But I'm not enamored by him. So, right now, even though we're not, I would take a good price.
Odebear now.
I could reconsider that. Odebear, again, really like the kid, Jack. I actually think his ceiling is potentially higher than Matisse's tells.
Yeah, me too.
But again, with our need for the squad, if a big offer came in, we can go and get a more experienced guy. I'd take it.
Now let's go with
the other. Like Odebear.
Let's go for another talented youngster here, Dave. Archie Gray. Bergvall was in the untouchable category. Is Archie Gray there?
No way. Do you know why I'm going to do this, Jack? I'm going to put him in good price right now.
Me too. Yeah.
And the reason why is, I remember last year I was going after the PSR window closed, and we only came out with Archie Gray. I let my feelings know on socials, and the backlash I got going, you hate Gray. Honestly, I've never had as much interaction on Twitter as I did that day. And all I want to do is just air my feelings, And honestly, how badly were they proven wrong? They were selling me this kid's he's going to walk straight into the team. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And don't get me wrong. I've always maintained and I've always given him his praise. a player that's played out of position. The fact that Mandra goes, out of all the players that I've got an options, I've got midfield, you can do a job for me in defence, speaks of the talent that is potentially there. But I'll be honest, when I've seen him step in the midfield for Tottenham, I haven't been enamored by him. So right
Yeah.
now, I'd cash in if the right price came.
Yeah. And you and I both love Richarlison, Dave, but would you say the same thing with Richarlison? Good price comes in. I
Um,
I love the guy. I love him. But I do feel like with the injury record, that's the only thing against this guy. It just I've made the case, you've made the case to keep him around. It's just the one thing that hangs over this dude's head is he just seems to pick up that injury out of nowhere at training or something, and then he's out for 2, 3 months. And then the strikers, Solanke in this case, for example, is then left all on his own. Same thing happened to Harry Kane.
do you know what, Jack? Right, I would actually be okay going in with Solanke and Richarlison next season as your two options. However, if an offer came in for Richarlison with how fit he's been over the last 2 seasons, I'd be willing to sell in the same sort of breath. And the reason why is, it looks like Vlahovic could be leaving Juventus. Gyökeres is out there. So if we can get a decent fee for Richarlison and invest another 30, 40 million on top of that, straight away you're bringing in, one of them players. So for me, I'd put him in the willing to sell, Jack.
All right. Well, let's see what else we have left here. I accidentally kept in Timo Werner, Ben Davis, desperate
Oh,
to sell,
desperate
to
to
be
sell.
honest. Brian Hill, desperate to sell.
Desperate to sell, not being messy.
Solomon, I'd say also desperate to sell really at this point too. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there we are then, everybody. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Thank you so much for keeping us entertained. We're trying to keep ourselves entertained, keep you entertained. We're not going to make up any transfer news of any
If
kind.
they're,
It's just not our style. But if anything comes in, we'll be jumping on it. Don't you worry,
yeah.
everybody.
And if there's any tier rankers you want to see us do, anything you want us to rank, let us know in the comments and we'll try and accommodate your requests.
And thank you to all the members as well for supporting the channel during this off season. And we'll see you next time. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.